The Prepper Podcast, Episode 16.
They've got to know whether or not their president's a crook.
The American people would never vote for socialism. He said, under the name of liberalism, the American people will adopt every fragment of the socialist program.
The Prepper Podcast is an up-to-date survival podcast based on military, wilderness, and modern-day survival and may be found at theprepperpodcast.com. I am Ken Jensen, and this is the podcast about everything survival. This is episode 16, and today is a little bit different. I am being interviewed by another podcaster. Okay, that's another guy doing exactly what I do. And you would think that we're competitors, but we're not. All right, we're on the same team. He is Jack Spirico of The Survival Podcast, and I am Ken Jensen of The Prepper Podcast. And like I said, we are not competitors. We are members of the same team. We are both trying to get out there and do our thing, and he's actually been doing it a little bit longer than I have, and he is really great. And I want you guys to go and check out his podcast, because believe it or not, I've listened to his podcast for several years now, and he is a really good one. This is the probably the one survival podcast that I actually listen to. I don't think that I listen to any other survival podcast. So here is a little bit of a shout out to Jack Spirico, and hopefully he'll listen to this podcast knowing that it's coming out. So, like I said, today's a little bit different. He is going to be interviewing me. I have done posts about START Triage, which stands for Simple Triage and Rapid Treatment. And we talk a lot about CERT training, which, believe it or not, I spoke to someone here recently about CERT training, and I may be getting CERT certified. So, that's pretty cool. Anyways, I'm really doing an intro right now, and that's about all I'm going to be doing. The rest of it I've already recorded, and I'm going to play it for you guys. But I was recently, well, you know what? Before I do that, let me go ahead and tell you that this episode may be found at theprepperpodcast.com/016. So I was just at a gun show, guys, in Jackson, Tennessee, okay? I traveled a little ways over to Jackson, Tennessee, and I really enjoyed it. It was kind of small, but it was actually really neat getting to know some of the people that frequent the gun shows around here and getting to know some of the guys in Jackson, Tennessee. I really enjoyed it. I really, really did. Talking to some of the guys, they had a lot of questions about the battery bank I had set up. This was pretty cool. I had all my studio stuff. I had a laptop set up. I had a second monitor set up with a little sound system, and I had my mic and everything else set up. And every bit of it was being run off of my battery bank. And everybody thought the battery bank was the coolest thing. Of course, some people had some conceptual errors about how a battery bank works, but that's okay. Everybody has to learn, right? Well, so like I said, I really enjoyed that. Let's go ahead and jump into some of the housekeeping. Now, social media links. I talk about this every time. So just go to theprepperpodcast.com/ the name of the social media site, like Facebook. So theprepperpodcast.com/Facebook. Then you can go to Twitter and Zello and Google Plus and all that, okay? So that's all I'm going to say about that. Now, I always have to mention, you can call into the Prepper Podcast call-in line. That is 978-KNOWS-IT. All right, 978 knows it. For those of you that do not have numbers on your touchpad, it is 978-566-9748. Once again, 978-566-9748. Now, here's the really awesome news that I have for you guys. As at the time of this recording, 2 weeks ago, the podcast that I put out 2 weeks ago has now had 1,400 listeners. And it's only been a day or two since the last podcast went out. Whenever I record this, I usually try to record this a few days in advance. So it is already at 730 listeners as well. And this 1,400 listeners, this was all new listeners. This wasn't somebody opened it up and then came back later, okay? Because I actually can see, when the person that's listening to it is new, or if they're just going through the link and revisiting where they've already been. So that's 1,400 new listeners. If you count total clicks on my podcast, it actually goes up to around 1,700 or so.
Hello, my name is Brian.
And now that I've already talked about that, I really enjoy you guys listening to my podcast. I actually do not like the sound of my own voice, so I really appreciate those who are willing to listen to me ramble on and on and on about everything and nothing all at the same time. But today, kind of in suit with last week, today I actually have another listener call. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and play that listener call for you guys, and then I'm going to give my response.
So we have to look at other options. We want it to be as energy efficient as possible. We've actually looked at having a large south-facing window, and then maybe even a rocket mass heater and or a wood-burning fireplace in the house. And then to keep it cool in the summer, we've looked into running water up to the roof and letting that trickle down to cool it off a little bit. So what are some of the other features that you would want included in a house that you are going to build? One more detail, I guess, is that the water table there is so high that we actually cannot have much of a basement, maybe a crawl space, but probably not much of a basement besides, or much of an actual basement, because it would flood there. So any input you could give would be helpful. Thank you.
All right, Brian from Indiana. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to kind of recap what you said. You said that you had 15 acres that you bought in a cornfield, essentially. Well, I want to congratulate you on the 15 acres. That's awesome. 15 acres is more than enough for you to have a full-sized homestead that will provide for you and your family. You can actually do that on less than 5 acres. So you're in a good position there. You want a completely off-grid dome house, but that was too much money. Well, I'm going to kind of give you some suggestions on that as well. You looked into south-face windows, water on the roof for the summer. I've actually done posts about, and I think I actually did this in a podcast in the past as well. Sometimes these things kind of mix together a little bit since I do both. But I've done a post at least on, spraying water using like a sprinkler system on your roof. That's fine as well. And let's see, you talked about wood-burning fireplace and rocket mass heater for heat. You've got a high water table. Okay, so we already know that you're not going to have much of a basement because of your high water table. So storm shelters and stuff like that, probably not in the works for you. All right, so once again, congratulations on the 15 acres. I know that the land there, I believe it's in central Indiana, the land there is usually fairly flat. It's very fertile and a little bit sandy. So you've got some of the better soil of the United States. And believe it or not, you actually have some of the best growing conditions. So I want to congratulate you on being in a great area for those who enjoy homesteading, especially if you like to cut firewood, because you're going to want to use a lot of firewood on your way to, through the winter. All right, so you looked into south-facing windows. Well, how about this? I agree with the south-facing windows, so let's keep those in there. That's a really good idea because you can keep plants and stuff on the south-facing windows, and that will make a very beautiful scenery, especially in the mid-afternoon, or not mid-afternoon, but toward the evening. If you're face those windows south to the southwest, and you will get more direct UV rays into your home. That will keep it a little bit warmer. But remember, during the summer, it will also keep it warmer, okay? Now, also, go ahead and put some blinds on those windows or some curtains on those windows. And this is what I'm talking about. On those blinds or curtains, on one side, you are going to have them painted high gloss, like high temp silver, okay? The silver reflects every bit of the UV and most of the heat that's going to hit it. And so during the summertime, you can go ahead and use your silver blinds or curtains, and it's just going to reflect all that extra heat off. If you are in the wintertime, though, you're going to use the black side. Believe it or not, if you use the black side and you leave a gap between the curtain and the curtain will heat up all the air between the window and the curtain, and you will actually feel a little bit of warm air rise up behind the curtain, and it will come out the top of the home. And what will happen is that warm air will release some of its warmth into your home. So you're actually going to have a little bit of convection action going on in your house. So that's a really cheap and really good idea for keeping warm. All right, you talked about the fireplace. You know what? I'm not going to tell you not to have a wood-burning fireplace, because fireplaces are really cool, and it's nice to have them and feel the crackle. But make sure that you put a lot of thought into getting rid of, a fireplace is one of the number one cost inefficiencies in a home, okay? Because it's very, very inefficient. It will let all the heat out of your home if you're not using a fire. And they're very inefficient as far as using a fire as well. So before using a wood-burning fireplace, I would recommend using a wood-burning stove, okay? Wood-burning stoves are extremely efficient, especially for what they are. And if you get the right ones, you can actually cook with them. Go ahead and, if you haven't already done it, listen to my podcast about, I think it was about heating and cooling your home. That's probably a few weeks ago. Give me 1 second. I'm going to go ahead and tell you how to get to that one. That is going to be episode 11. So what you're going to do is go ahead and go to the top of your browser and type this in, but don't hit enter because you're listening to a podcast right now. But go to the top of your browser and type in theprepperpodcast.com/011. So that is episode 11. And that is all about heating and cooling your house. And I do talk a lot about the different wood-burning methods for keeping warm, okay? But use a wood stove. A lot of the wood stoves will also be very useful for cooking and stuff like that. Now, you'll throw a couple logs on a wood stove, you'll go to bed, and you will wake up the next morning, and it will be like 50 degrees in your home. That's not extremely warm, but what I'm telling you is just a couple logs in your wood-burning fireplace or wood-burning stove will keep going until the next morning. You will at least have enough still burning so that you can throw more logs in there and quickly warm your home up. So I definitely recommend a stove over a fireplace. I recommend you get that, all right? I also like the idea of you getting the rocket mass heater. I'm not covering that quite yet because I'm about to get to it for another reason, okay? You asked what I would like in my home. Now, beyond what I'm going to tell you about the construction of the home, I actually would love a home with a safe room in it, and that safe room is also, a gun room. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be like super structural. It doesn't have to be this rebar reinforced cement room or anything like that. Something that actually has to have extra ventilation to it so that people don't suffocate, okay? It doesn't have to be all that. What I want is just a room that's kind of hidden away out of the house. Now, if it does have all that, that's kind of cool. I would welcome that kind of stuff. But really just a room that's hidden away that has all my firearms in it, and it's a safe room. If somebody broke in, I'd like my family to be able to run in that safe room, grab all the guns, pump them up, get them ready to go. And if somebody opens that door, bam, they're freaking taking a dirt nap, okay? So that's just just something that I like in a home, and that really has nothing to do with what you're talking about as far as this dome. Okay, now I usually give more thought to the land than I do the home. Okay, because I dabble in permaculture as well. I am a military, wilderness, and modern day survivalist. So some would call me a homesteader, some would call me a prepper. But I do permaculture stuff as well. I'm not quite as big as Jack is, the guy who's going to interview me. He is a permaculturist, okay? That is what he does. All right, I'm a little more into the wilderness stuff than he is. He's a little more into the permaculture stuff than I am. And I guess I shouldn't say he's more into it. I really enjoy it, and I really like to do it. But he has a little more knowledge in the permaculture stuff than I do, which is fine. I'm learning, and, I always tell everybody I'm a student of survival. But I digress. Let's go back to what I was talking about. Give more thought to the land, okay? You're going to want ponds. You're going to want them up, level. You're going to want them up from the house. You want them higher up in elevation from the house. So if you do have contour of the land, then go ahead and do your pond higher up than your house. Because what that does for you is, even if the only thing you could do is run a garden hose from your pond to your house, gravity will do the work for you, and you don't need a pump. If you are going to have a pond level or below your house, then I would recommend having a tank above your house, okay? Not literally right above your house, all right? In higher elevation to your house, so up contour from your house, okay? This all, okay, let me back up. This will always, I can't believe I did that. I don't even know what noise that was. This will always allow pressure and a backup water source to your home. All right, I always want to set up some kind of permaculture system. All right, I know that it's cornfield, so there's chances that it's been sprayed and stuff like that. Go ahead and chop down all that corn, but leave it on the land. You're going to bring in excavators and stuff. You're going to dig swells, and you're going to dig some berms, I guess. Well, your water table's so high, you probably don't need a whole lot of swells. This permaculture stuff really is based on the area. I think the most common answer in permaculture is it depends. So there's a good chance that you may not even need a swell. It'll be really easy for you to have a pond, I think. And but you doing some hugelkultur style beds or whatever, or some berms to plant into, those will be really nice. And here's the thing, you can utilize all the water that falls onto your land, and you can route it through the contour of your land to give you multiple ponds. You can have an ecosystem growing similar to what's going to be in a jungle, and it's all going to be edible foods and stuff like that, as long as you set up this permaculture system the correct way. So I recommend taking a couple permaculture design courses, and that would help you out a lot. I have a blog post on it. I don't know really which one it is, but go ahead and just look up permaculture design on cleversurvivalist.com. look up permaculture design, and I'm sure you'll find it. There's one in there where I talk about some free permaculture design courses. Okay, there's a guy named Jeff Lawton, GeoffeLawton. Go to jefflawton.com, and he does permaculture design courses. They're a little bit pricey, but the thing is he is the man when it comes to permaculture, okay? He is the man. He is the one that everybody wants to be like. All right, so set up that permaculture system, and I recommend doing all this stuff before your home. All right, before you actually build your home, doing all this. And until you build a final shelter, what I considered doing was multiple tiny houses. And you can get pretty good sized places from Lowe's and stuff like that. The sheds and stuff, the barn style sheds and stuff. They make really good tiny homes. And what we considered, my wife and I, we actually considered getting a few of those. Have one of them, as a room house, and the other one as like a kitchen house. Another one was going to be like the bath house and stuff like that. Sure, you've got to trek from house to house for each thing, but this is the way that a lot of civilizations were actually designed, and it seemed to work really well for those guys. And I always thought that it was kind of neat to have a bunch of little cottages, each with their own little thing. And you don't need a lot to heat those things. You put some good insulation in those things, make some thick walls. You got one space heater, and that sucker gets toasty, and it stays that way. And, because it's very well, because you have it very well insulated, you're only going to need one little bitty window unit as well to cool it. I know that you're thinking off-grid stuff, but I'm just giving you some little tips here on a way to reduce your heating and your heating and cooling costs and stuff by having these small homes. But this is probably a temporary thing for you, because it sounds like your heart is set on a big dome-style house. Well, let's get to that big dome-style house. You go ahead and build something above ground, okay? Build something above ground, but you need to build it so that it is designed to have dirt put on top of it. Chances are is you're not going to pull the dirt from your home. You could probably use a little bit of that dirt from digging the pond and stuff like that, but you're probably going to bring dirt in. Fortunately, dirt is not extremely expensive, although it is a little bit pricey. So you're effectively going to build an earth ship, okay? Earth ships are actually made with nothing but dirt and tires, essentially, okay? Go to Google. Just go to Google Images and type in earth ship, and you're going to see all these other houses. A lot of them are like Adobe-style homes and stuff like that. Well, there's a way that you can build earth ships, or you can build underground homes that can take the humidity of your area, of all the rain that you may get. It can take the humidity and all the rain and stuff like that, okay? On occasion, you may have to bring in some more dirt if it starts washing away. But if you do the right thing and you start creating a ecosystem of plants around and on your home, you're probably not going to have to deal with eroding dirt. And there are ways to terrace this dirt so that it doesn't erode away and stuff like that off your home. So you're building it above ground, you're going to bring in dirt, and you're going to put dirt around it. So you can essentially create like a dome-style house out of dirt, but inside it's going to be square and a little bit smaller. So this right here, if you're 1 to 1.5 feet below the ground, you stay at a constant temperature, probably about 65 degrees in your area. It might be 60. It may go down to 55. I highly doubt it'll go down to 55. It might go down to 60. But you know what? My storm shelter is always around 67 degrees, whether it is winter or summer. It's awesome to go down there, and it just amazes me when I go down there that I haven't done anything for the temperature down there, and it is the same exact temperature. It is the perfect temperature. That is why they use these things for root cellars, which is perfect for keeping all your stuff. Now, you were talking about a rocket mass heater. How does a rocket mass heater work? Oh, I know. It essentially takes a rocket stove, lays it on its side. All the exhaust goes up into this chamber where the space gets larger and larger, and all the hot air rises and expands. By rising and expanding, it creates a vacuum which will bring in more air through the rocket stove type chamber. All right, the burner chamber. And all that is going up into a big drum, and it's giving you instant heat. All right, the big drum is very hot. Do not touch it. You will burn your hand off, okay? It gets extremely, extremely hot. Now, around that drum, there is another shroud. That's the shroud that I'm talking about getting extremely hot, but there's a shroud around it, and then there's an exhaust. In the exhaust system is where the magic happens as well. The exhaust system usually goes through a big mass. This mass is usually where people sit. They make benches out of it. This is almost always an Adobe style clay that's put on top of it. And what it does is it warms up this bench. And this bench, if you run a rocket mass heater for a couple hours, it will stay hot in the home for about... it's probably going to stay warm in there all night long, okay, off of just a couple hours. And you'll come in there the next morning, and it'll still be probably nice and toasty. It'll do a lot more than a wood stove. But that doesn't mean that I don't recommend getting a wood stove, okay? The rocket mass heater, let's think about this. After it goes through the bench, where's it going? It's going outside. Well, you're underground, aren't you? So why don't we make this rocket mass heater go up and out, but we can design the exhaust to go through the dirt around our home. Isn't that interesting? So we can heat up all the dirt that is around our home, and the plants will have warm dirt. So, you're going to be, and you know what? I didn't even think about this, but you're going to be warming up all this dirt around your home. And if you've got plants that are growing during the wintertime, believe it or not, you're going to have a much longer growing season because the plants are going to have this warm soil to keep on. So as you keep your home warm, you're going to keep the soil warm as well. And like I said, the soil is always going to be a constant temperature, but if you're pumping heat into this soil, you're creating a huge mass of warm dirt that's going to keep these plants super happy, okay? So I do recommend having some Earthship style home, and if you look into Earthships and you decide that you want to build yourself one, look into the fact that a lot of them are using old Coke bottles and beer bottles and things like that in order to let light into the home. There's a lot of creative designs out there on Earthships. I always look into something a little more basic. I've always wanted something a little more basic, just easy to build, easy to maintain. All right. Well, I really hope that answered your question, Brian, from Indiana. And I hope that you guys will call in with more questions. I hope that you don't have hardly any more questions there, Brian, okay? Once again, you guys can call me at 978-KNOWS-IT. That is 978-566-9748. And now for the show. I'm sorry I went so long with that question, but it was kind of loaded. So I'm going to transition over to the
all right, folks. With that, I want to say, welcome to the Survival
Podcast. Interviewing
Thanks,
me,
I'm happy to be here.
Ken Jensen of the
I've got you
Podcast.
on today to talk about
we are doing this
triage.
interview on Skype,
and probably
so he is going to be breaking up a little bit.
But
and understand that
I always like to
is
get the
Skype's
audience kind of
problem,
introduced to the
not
guest with
his.
some level
If
of
you
personal
listen to
connection.
the interview
most
on his
people
website,
don't,
believe it or
you know,
not,
at 10
you
years of
can
age, think I'm
hear
up
just
and
about
learn emergency
everything
triage.
that
They
I
have
and he are
dreams
both
of, like,
saying.
I don't know,
So
skateboarding
go ahead
or
and check
something
out
like
the
that.
Survival Podcast.
And then
as
they
well.
go through kind of
Here's
crooked
the
path
interview,
and they
guys.
end up, in whatever they end up in. Could you talk about your background? Ended up as Today you are the producer of the blog, the cleversurvivalist.com. How do you end up there from wherever you started?
Well, you mentioned everybody on just a couple shows ago. You mentioned in your intro for someone that once they had you had the skateboarding thing in there, but you also had that they like to go and spend time out in the woods. Well, that was me. So my history actually did kind of lead to this. What it is I grew up as a child in Arkansas, and my father and I spent a lot of time in the forests and stuff around my house, and we did a lot of primitive camping, a lot of hunting. And that kind of got me into the wilderness survival stuff. Now, through lots of time, that naturally turned into urban survival, and I'll get to that in just a minute. If you want to know a little bit about me professionally, I spent time as an electronics technician and nuclear reactor operator in the military, and I hated all the red tape, so I decided to get out of that and get into electronics, and then that led me to industrial electricity. So all of these are like really hands-on technical jobs, and a lot of that seeds knowledge that will help you in survival. And then in a business home front, I've succeeded and failed both in marketing and in real estate. And I know you, Jack. I listen to your business podcast, or used to. That podcast was really awesome, and I know that you think that failure is a success because you learned something from it, and I completely agree with that. So that also helps in survival, because in survival you're never going to succeed. I am entrepreneur minded just because of all the business stuff in the past and all the books and things that I've read. So to make a full circle here, as I was getting into the world of online business, I was turned on to your podcast, and I've listened to pretty much every episode of your survival podcast, and ended up listening to your business podcast. So while I'm really into wilderness survival and I'm learning things and I start despising the way the government does things, I'm also listening to this libertarian guy that feels the exact same way about me or about the government. And, well, that kind of turned me into an urban survivalist very quickly, a modern day survivalist, as you would say.
Yeah, and I think it's important when people make that. I know you, because you listen all the time, but really the two worlds overlap because the skills certainly transfer. There's just different resources that you harvest to do different things. And, my view is that with modern survival, what we're doing is we're not at all discarding the primitive skills. We're just not ignoring the resources that are available in modern times. And those two worlds together make for a powerful combination. Again, I know I'm saying that because we have new people tuning in here all the time and maybe don't have that frame of reference when you use the term modern survivalism. But you actually have this blog, and you're a podcast yourself. What I've got you on to talk today, though, about is emergency triage and what you call the SMART method, a mass casualty emergency response for first responders. Can you explain what START Triage stands for?
Yeah, START Triage actually is it just stands for Simple Triage and Rapid Treatment. That's what the acronym is. And well, let's kind of back up a little bit, and we'll just talk about what simple triage is, because that's what's going to be the most beneficial. The rapid treatment is kind of an after-the-fact thing, and that's mostly what the medical professionals are going to do. My company that I work for now, because I'm not a full-time podcaster, which I would love to be, Jack, my company actually put me through school for this, for the triage portion of it. And, well, it works really well whenever disasters strike. So simple triage is a first responder type triage, and it's usually going to be at the scene of a mass casualty incident. And some examples of this would be earthquakes, highway accidents, airplane crashes, train derailments, building collapses, economic collapses, terrorist attacks, material releases, earthquakes, things like that, where there are going to be a lot of people hurt, a lot of people dead, and a lot of people that are screaming at you, saying that they're hurt, but they are not the priority for medical attention. I believe that the simple triage is a very valuable thing, especially if your listeners are going to be joining the Citizens Assisting Citizens that you have, and I'll let you talk about that if you want. But the Citizens Assisting Citizens would be a perfect thing to implement the START Triage plan, because you can take medically uneducated people, and they can learn simple triage that will help all of the first responders and ambulances, all the medical professionals that are going to show up.
Yeah, I mean, can you talk a little bit about the reason for triage? Why we take this approach?
Well, the reason for triage is to determine the priority of a patient's treatments based on the severity of their condition. It's a quick way to prioritize the injuries so that we can figure out who needs immediate attention and who doesn't. Because when a medical professional shows up at, a bombing at a marathon, and you have bloody people all over the place, well, there's only so many of those. But if everybody has simple triage training, then you have a whole bunch of people in the crowd. Instead of standing there, they could be sorting through the people and decide who the medical personnel need to pay attention to.
Yeah, I mean, some of the things that I've dealt with in the past would be, you basically are taking charge of a situation, and the first be who's hurt, and hands go up everywhere. Who's hurt and can walk? Every hand stays up. Go that way. Get out of here. Just get you out of the way. If you're walking wounded, you're not a huge priority, and more is available that way. And let's get you out of the way so we can deal with the people who are a higher priority. And then it goes on from there, right?
Yeah. I really like to think this is what I thought was really cool about triage, is because if you're on the front line in military, if you're on the front line and you're a medic or something, well, that's essentially what a medic is going to do, is this triage. And, it was used in World War I by French doctors just so that they could treat everybody and give them the care that they needed, because there was such mass casualties that they just couldn't do with everybody. So they divide them into three categories, or they divided them into three categories, which are those who are likely to live no matter what care they get, those that are likely to die no matter what care they get, and those where immediate care is going to make a difference whether they live or die. So now we use it to decide how immediate a response is going to be for that victim.
Yeah, that puts people in touch with a certain reality of violence, I guess would be the way to put it. It's to, in this day and age, television shows and people constantly having their heart jump started 400 times on TV or whatever, to think that you save any dead yet. But there's a harsh reality that in a mass casualty situation, there are people that if you could transport like START operating team, they're still going. And the number of people that are going to die is going to go up. We can't do that. So also the reality on the ground of maybe if this person was CPR right now, there'd be a chance, but under the current conditions, this going the group 3, and that's the horrible thing. But I think actually this way helps people to start to understand the reality that we may have to eventually deal with, right?
Yeah, I think it really does. It shows a reality, and it shows you that, there are things beyond our control. I mean, you use the analogy all the time. You can be this essentially what everybody nowadays would call the crazy doomsday prepper guy with all this stuff, underground bunker and everything, and you can walk across the street and get hit by a Mack truck and bam, you're freaking dead. Just because you're a survivalist doesn't mean you're going to survive everything that happens. all we do is we put systems in place so that we can help our families and ourselves have the best means of survival, but not only survive, we want to thrive when something like this happens. We want to, when there's mass casualty now, let's bring it back to the topic. When there's mass casualty, it's really good to have all these people that, I want to bring it back to your citizens assisting citizens. I know this isn't an infomercial for that, but that is a really great program. I think you're doing great things, Jack, and I think that's just a really great thing that you're doing to implement the citizens assisting citizens, because we don't have enough personnel to take care of this stuff. We need to have people who are educated, at least to the point where they can make it easier on those who are doing this. And just because we don't agree with the policies of government, and like you, I'm a libertarian, and I agree that 99.99% of things should be private. And we won't get into that too much today since this is all about triage. But even though we don't agree with all these policies, and even though we don't agree with some of the people that have been put in place, we can do whatever we can to help so that we can save lives. Because like you said recently, we're not all about ourselves. We're not selfish people. We're out there trying to help other people as well. That's why, we have big sacks of rice and stuff for our neighbors. It's cheap, but it's going to help them live whenever something hits, and then my family gets all the really good stuff because guess what? They're my family.
Yeah, I think of what Steve Harris says about storing deer corn for your neighbors because it's easier to feed them than them. And there's some truth to that. Citizens assist citizens things, that project right now is in a sort of holding pattern. I've turned that over to the board of directors, and they're trying to set it up so that we can work with NGOs, non-governmental organizations, and organizations. We're waiting on approval of 501c3 status, which is a pain in the butt, and don't really have a lot to do on a daily basis. Hopefully, we're this thing formally launched first quarter of the year, but I just say that so that anybody that's thinking of helping in any way you can, help where you can when you can, and hopefully we'll go on because it is an important initiative. But for right now, this topic here, could you take people maybe through a typical scenario to show how the START system would work, like create a disaster and then how people using the triage could help make things manageable in a bad situation?
Well, Jack, I'd love to take you through the scenario, but as far as the other stuff that you said after that, we're on Skype and you keep cutting out on me, but I will try to do the best that I can with what I heard, okay?
Sure.
All right, so the scenario that I'm going to talk about today isn't going to be super typical, but everybody knows about large highway accidents. Well, that can be that's kind of the same thing as what I'm going to talk about. Let's consider a train accident, a train derailment. So if you're coming up to a train stop or whatever, and it's right beside a turn, and then you see the train derail on the turn because somebody decided that somebody forgot to do their preventative maintenance on something that's going to shift the rails or shift the tracks, and then the train gets derailed. Well, guess what? There's a good chance that there's going to be a lot of hurt people there. So what we would do, and here the steps are pretty easy to remember. It's RPM. Now there's a video that makes it real cheesy that I sent to you, and I have it available on one of my blog pages. But the steps are RPM, and the cheesiness in that video was when you're feeling all revved up, just remember RPM, which, okay. I said that's pretty freaking cheesy. But it stands for respirations, pulse and perfusion, and then mental status. So first thing you're going to do whenever you go into that train is you're going to walk in there and you're going to say, all right, if there's anybody that can get up and walk out, come with me. And then as they walk out, you're going to have tags or tape or something like that that have a color or a word on them. So anybody who walks out, you're going to tag them as green and minor, because if they have breath and if they have pulse and they can understand what you're saying enough to walk out on their own, they are the minor group of people. Now back to what you were saying, you get them the heck out of the way, because you don't need 30 people standing there telling you how to do what you're doing, and you don't need 30 people standing there telling you that they're the worst ones. So we mark them as minor. Then we can actually get to work. We may want to actually keep a couple with us because, they may not know anything, but they can easily help you when you have to help stop bleeding and stuff like that. So first thing you're going to do after you've marked those guys as minor is you're going to go through each person, start where you're standing. Don't look around and decide, which one you're going to get to first, because each person's going to get less than 30 seconds of your attention. So you're going to start where you're at, and you're going to go to the closest person and make your rounds. First thing you're going to check is respirations. If this person is not breathing, then you can position their airways to see if they're going to breathe. You can do a finger sweep into their mouth to look for things in there. You can adjust their neck, and they've actually decided, the people who started implementing this, they've decided that it is better for the person to breathe and live than do you worry about aggravating a neck injury. I mean, wouldn't you agree?
I would agree with that. I've always had an issue with, he's not breathing. So I might screw up his neck. I don't do something, he's going to die. So, yeah, go ahead.
Well, after you position the airways, is the person still breathing? No? Well, here's the sad part. You have to mark him as deceased, because there's a good chance he's not going to make it by the time anybody gets there anyways. But if he is breathing after you've done that, well, then you're going to mark him as immediate. And that person is done. That's as far as you go with that one. Now, if you've checked someone and they do have respirations without your intervention, well, if they're breathing really fast, I don't know if this is going to go over the mic, but if you hear them going, well, that right there means that they're having trouble and something is wrong. So you mark them as immediate right away. That person's done. Now, if they are breathing and it's under 30 breaths a minute, but over 10, then you're going to move on to the next step. So that was R in the RPM. Now, P is pulse and perfusion. So you're checking for their pulses after you found out that they can breathe by themselves and their breath is normal. So you look for whether the pulse is there, or you look for what's called capillary refill. That's what the perfusion is. And the best way to do the capillary, and I actually would prefer people do the capillary refill instead of the pulse, because if you push down on your thumbnail, it goes white underneath your finger. And then you let go, it's going to go pink or reddish in color within 2 seconds. So if theirs doesn't do that within 2 seconds, they have an issue. They may have a faint pulse, but they still have an issue, and you mark them as immediate. While you're doing this, you look around for bleeding. If they are bleeding profusely, well, you're going to go ahead and put pressure on it, do whatever you have to do to reduce that. But we are not doing first aid to people right now. We are sorting people. So you can get one of those minors that you told to get the heck out of the way. Well, that's one of the few that you keep there, and you tell them to put pressure on that wound or something so that you can move on to the next person, because they obviously don't know what they're doing. So, I mean, they can be helpful somewhere. Otherwise, they would be doing what you're doing now. So, if you are getting the capillary refill or they have a strong pulse, then you're going to move on to the next step. The next step is the M portion of RPM. It's just mental status. Mental status is whether they can follow your instructions or not, really. All right, so what you're going to do on this person is you're going to start asking them questions. You can do things like ask their names. You can ask the day of the week. You can ask them to squeeze your hand. Just something that takes a little bit of thought. Don't ask them the square root of 5,630. But, you want to require them to think about something in order to do what you're asking. So when we asked those people to walk out, that was checking their mental status right there. Now, these people were asking, because they obviously didn't get up and walk out, we're going to ask them this other stuff. Now, because they couldn't walk out, we're not going to mark them as minor if they can follow the commands. We've gone through RPM all the way, and, they seem fine for the most part, but they didn't walk out. So we're going to mark them as delayed. It's yellow. It's delayed. And what that means is they're not immediate, but they get attention before people who walked out. If they comprehend the answer, that's when they're delayed. If they cannot comprehend what you're saying to them and can't follow simple direction, well, then we're going to mark them as immediate also. Immediate is red, and I didn't tell you earlier, but deceased is black. Okay. So that's pretty much what you're going to do in the scenario. And I think a really good scenario is the one on that cheesy video that I sent you.
When people listen to that, they might come up with the question then, you mentioned ABC. How does it relate to RPM?
All right, well, all right, most of the people who are going to be doing this, let's be honest here, most normal people aren't going to be going through the simple triage method. Most of them are going to be the first person on scene that is a first responder. And those people know the ABCs of CPR. CPR, cardiopulmonary resuscitation. I think I got that right.
Yep.
But and the ABC stands for airway, breathing, and circulation. Now that is what's used for CPR for you to assess a person when you're giving them CPR to determine the care that they're going to get, whether they need CPR or not. It's a way for you to set things up. But the reason why it relates to RPM is because if you think about it, if you just back up a second, everybody has their own acronyms and mnemonics. But ABC is airway, breathing, circulation. RPM is respiratory, perfusion, and mental status. The only difference here is that mental status, because you're checking the breathing and airway in respirations, and you're checking circulation in the pulses and perfusion. So it's essentially they're looking at the same stuff. And that's how they relate. Just one of them can be done by an uneducated person, and I hate saying uneducated. I really do, but I just have a lack of better terms for them. But people who are ignorant to actual CPR, or someone who is not going to do CPR because he's one person in a 50 casualty incident.
Well, I think there is that point that that triage is the first thing that has to be done, because while you're jacking around trying to breathe life into somebody that should have a black tag on them, you could have identified 10 who need immediate treatment. When responders get there, they can provide that immediate treatment, and you've helped save 10 lives versus tried to save one that wasn't going to make it. The other thing is, once that triage is done, if you have any of these advanced skills, that triage is there for you to prioritize who you go after first and who you try to help first. Because once the triage is done, if you know CPR or you have, you have a background as a paramedic or an EMT, you can start to render aid. But if you start trying to render aid before assessing that situation, people who would not have died will. And people who were not going to live anyway will possibly take your time, or people that would have lived no matter what, they would have been okay. We'll end up taking time that could have been spent with someone like was in serious condition that you could have helped. And I think it's hard for people to get their head around the fact that in some situations, some people just don't qualify for your time, not because of who they are as a human being, because of flat reality. And it's something that I'm sure ER doctors have to think about on a daily basis, but it's hard for the average person to get their head around.
Yeah, that's true. It's really hard for people to just, I mean, you walk up and you see all these bodies lying there, and half the people are screaming at you, the other half aren't saying anything. So the first one you're going to go to is a screaming person, which, and if you think about it, that's probably the one that you don't have to go to, because they're screaming at you.
Yeah.
You know, and all these other people are just laying there, and they're not going to get treatment just because they didn't draw your attention.
Yeah.
That's not right.
I mean, because there would be some times where the START system would cause you to do something that you would call counterintuitive and to your natural response. So, you know, could you talk about why it's important to continue to follow that system if you feel that way?
Yeah. The system, well, first off, let's say the system is a suggestion. It is not something that people have to follow to the T. Mm-hmm. It's important that people understand that. You teach a survival mentality. You teach people to think. Don't just freaking act, but think. This gives you a method, but you still got to use your brain. Don't be a freaking moron. All right? The idea is going to be to quickly assess anyone and everyone and then decide who to begin work on afterward. This is exactly what you were about to, or that's what you were talking about a minute ago, is once you're done with the triage, you can go back and start helping people. The system is over at that point. The triage system is over. Now you can go into first responder or CPR or whatever you know. But one thing that really, I mean, this is a sad thing, so hopefully people don't turn it off now. But if you're in a mass casualty and you come up on a baby that's not breathing, right? I mean, we all have children, and we would hate for this to be our child. But the baby's not breathing. And you feel a faint pulse. What's the first thing you're going to want to do, Jack? You know it's got a little bit of a pulse.
Well, you're going to want to start CPR and try to save the baby. I mean, that's what you're going to want to do. I mean, there's no doubt in the world that's what you're going to want to do.
Yes, that is what I want to do.
Yeah.
And I'm the one telling you not to do it.
Yeah.
That's what I want to do, because it's a baby and it has a little bit of a heartbeat. So you think, oh, I could save this one, especially because I know CPR.
Correct.
So the START method tells you the baby isn't breathing. You did your airway sweep. You moved its head. It's dead. So you just allowed someone's baby to die. But on the flip side, there could be 4 babies behind that one that if you don't tag them immediate, they're not going to get help. So
yeah, I think it's all situational. I mean, if you had bunch of people in a similar type of situation, let's say an earthquake or whatever, and nobody is completely incapacitated, but there's a lot of people scraped up and hurt, but everybody that everybody you see, everybody you look at is coherent, you're not going to be running around putting tags on people. This is for a specific type of situation where it's an overwhelming numbers situation, and the sorting process saves lives. In the end, since some people are going to die, the question then becomes, how can we save the most people?
Exactly, Jack. It's all about how can we save the most people. And I agree with you. I wouldn't come up on a casualty of 3 people and start going through the START method, because I'm mentally going through that method by looking at the 3 people.
Yeah.
Now, if there's 40 or 50 people there, I don't know where to start, so I'm going to start where I'm at. I'm going to tell people to get up and go, and I'm going to start that START method. And once that's over with, then I'm going to put on my first responder hat and start trying to save lives.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, the other thing is, if I'm in that situation and I do have significant training in first response, if I have people around me that can do this for me, the triage for me, then I can start paying attention to the red tags. And I think that is the other thing. This is designed to be used in a somewhat of a teamwork mentality. That's what it's designed to do. I mean, what you've explained, if you have a person who's kind of sharp and gets it and wants to help, I can teach you to do this literally in 1 minute. And just start saying, this is what I need you to do with these people. Let's get the walking wounded the hell out of here, and this is how I want you to check everybody else. And then I can go into that first responder mode. And I mean, what you've described is a huge part of, and it doesn't seem like it ever goes anywhere, but CERT training. In fact, part of the reason we came up with the CAC idea was that CERT is this great program, and the CERT people show up and are always told we don't need you. And I think they've lost the funding for that program, so they're going to stop doing the trainings. But triage is a big part of the initial CERT training. And it's because it's for this situation. It's for this very reason that if I'm running around figuring out who needs my help, every minute that I spend doing that is a minute I could have spent with someone who was already determined to have needed it, where I could have been making a difference instead of figuring out, oh, this person's dead. Oh, this person's just in some kind of, they've seized up mentally. They could get up and walk away if they wanted to right now, and they're freaked out and they won't do it. Fine, you can sit there until we get everybody else. And every second I spend to do that, I could be, giving somebody who's right on the cusp a few breaths and chest compressions and get them kind of stabilized enough that the next level of response can get them out and possibly keep them alive. Or I could be dealing with a serious bleed and get that under control. And then, like you said, bring in somebody else, a bystander, and say, I've done as much as I can with this. You need to hold on here and rest and just keep reassuring this person that we're taking care of them.
Yeah,
for me to function that way, I need someone else doing the other stuff.
Yeah, you do. And here's a couple other ideas along with that. I mean, you don't have to have another person to put pressure on bleed, do you? You don't have to have another person. You can rip the person's sleeve off and use it as a tourniquet.
Sure.
And then people who can't even stop a bleed can sit there and say, you're going to be okay. You're going to be okay, and reassure them and hold their hand, to make them feel better so they're not screaming at you, the guy who's trying to do the job. Now,
and they're also freaking out the other people. I mean, that's something I don't think you will get about a mass casualty. The person there that's like gone into like a shock state, but not like I don't know what has gone hysterical. Let's put it that way. They've gone hysterical. That person screaming, we're all going to die or whatever it is detrimental to the health of the other people trying to survive. And if we can reassure that person and get confidence into the people that are there, that help is coming, we are going to do everything we can for you. It sounds ridiculous because there's such a mechanical mentality in life and death in modern times, but it does increase the number of people who will survive. And it also increases the number of people that won't just survive, but will recover mentally from the situation. A person that's in an event like this has been damaged physically, yes, but they've also been damaged mentally. And the mental injury is compounded by the physical injury. And all of the things that go on in the initial treatment add on to that mental trauma. And you can have a person that we put back together, the doctors do the best they can, they recover physically quite well, and they're never emotionally recovered. And part of that emotional recovery is understand right from the very beginning, treating the entire patient and understanding, if this person's over here screaming and yelling and hollering and there's really nothing wrong with them, or they're bleeding, but you're going to be okay, right? It looks like a lot of blood, but it's not. You're not leaking a lot of blood. We've got a compression, and we can just calm that person down. We increase the survivability and recoverability of everybody in the incident.
You wouldn't be talking about post-traumatic stress disorder and having the ability to help somebody not get it, would you?
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm going with that, yeah.
Kind of like you, I don't believe in all these 9 billion different disorders, but post-traumatic stress is definitely one that I do agree is an actual disorder because you go through something like that. I mean, you're just going to have nightmares about it.
Yeah.
If you don't mind me backpedaling a second.
No, go ahead.
You actually triggered a thought in my mind that I haven't even thought up until now. I have, I showed you or sent you a link to some charts that give direction, all the steps that I was talking about. There are charts for those. Now, what if we just had a lot of those charts on cardstock or on something like a quarter sheet of paper or something, and we handed those out to people, and they now can do the steps.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of value to that. It would seem to me that, like, for a triage situation, you have these tags, that the tags themselves could be the instructions. You could hear, and, a person has to have a reasonable capability to function that way. But I think a lot of people get it. I think that the biggest problem that you would ever have in using people not previously trained for triage to do triage is getting them over the mental hurdle of, you got to keep moving. You got to sort and you got to keep moving, because it is very counterintuitive. If I see someone in pain, hurting, and I know that I could do something to make them more likely to survive, or to relieve their pain, or to relieve their anxiety, everything in me as a human being wants to do it. The reason I even know what to do in the first place and have training is not so that I can say, well, I have this background. It's so I can do it. That's the only reason I would even invest the time and effort to learn the skill set. Because I don't want to do it as a profession. I'm not an EMT. I'm not a paramedic. I don't want to be one. So it's innate in most people to want to help their fellow man, especially when they're in pain or suffering. And to get people that don't even know what to do to stop trying to do what they don't know and just do what they can, I think is your biggest hurdle. And it's why, I think it's a big part of why they did put a lot of this into the CERT training, because it was like, if we have a group of people that can do this and they know what to do and they get why, then all of our first responders are more effective.
Yeah, I agree with that. I actually don't really, how do I put it this way? The tags are great. The tags are made by someone who's really into making things the best that they are for the first responders, stuff like that. But for us as just, citizens, as survivalists, I mean, we could keep a stack of expensive cards. But how about this? Why don't you have like a belt attached to like a little carabiner clip and have 4 different colors of electrical tape on it?
Yeah.
So you could just start marking everybody by color, and first responders are supposed to know that stuff.
Yeah.
And
it is. I think that's one thing we said it's not a rule, it's not a requirement, it's a system, it's a suggestion, it's something that works, but it is a standard, right? I mean, that's what you're getting at there. It is a standard. Green means something. Red means something. It's known. And a person that doesn't know it probably is not employed as a professional first responder. It's as known as, when I was in telecommunications, wires have a color code. I couldn't have done my job if I didn't know the color code for the wires. A paramedic knows these color codes as well as they know how to drive their emergency vehicle, or as well as they know how to put on a bandage.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, they've had this training, and this is like this is an introductory training. This isn't like, oh, let's be a first responder and let's go through simple triage. This is, before you become a first responder, let's do the most important thing, because you might be the first one on the scene of an accident. And as far as the color code goes, Jack, I'm going to disagree with you, but politely.
Okay.
You could have done that job without color coding, because I worked with someone as an industrial electrician who's completely colorblind. Isn't that scary?
Yeah.
But
yeah, he was an electrician. He has a lot less wires to worry about.
Yeah, well, we just went ahead and made him a supervisor because he scared us.
I guess so. This is the black one, right? No.
No, that one's brown.
What I'm talking about, we would be running cables that were 500 pairs.
Yeah, no, I'm just kidding with you.
You got to get through that. Anyway, but I'll tell you what I like about the electrical tape, right? If you had, as part of your go bag, your bug out bag, your kit, whatever you call your kit, 4 rolls of electrical tape, right? Black, red, yellow, and green.
Yep.
Yes, they will function as triage tags. Yes, a first responder should know what the hell it means when they see a guy wandering around with a green piece of tape on his arm. Absolutely. But they do a million other things.
Yes, they do.
Tape is a multi-function thing. It can function as cordage. It can function as binding. It can function as a marker for other reasons. So I actually have never heard anybody say that before. And I think that it's, if you learn this system and add those things to your kit, you've also just added this multifunctional element, this function stacking to your kit.
Yes. Permaculture principle there.
It's going in my kit.
You keep throwing that in there, bud.
Yeah, it's going in. I'll probably have tape ordered off of Amazon before we're done with this interview.
That's awesome. Yeah, as an electrician, I automatically kind of go there. Because I use electrical tape like a lot of people use duct tape. It's, if it moves and isn't supposed to, I throw tape on it. If it's not supposed to move, or if it's not supposed to move and it does, I throw tape on it. But if it is supposed to move and it doesn't, I throw WD-40 on it. And then, after that, then I have to start thinking about stuff. And God forbid we survivalists do that, right?
Yeah, absolutely, man. Yeah, I'm actually looking. There's actually some packages of tape that have every color that you need except black.
Well, that's
they also have white though in them, so black's easy to find. So
yeah, black is the standard. So you're gonna go to Amazon and you're gonna see huge packages of black tape.
Black, yeah. What a great idea. And the multifunction, and see what now you got my head going. So we're talking about triage here, but I can think of multiple possibilities of scenarios where you would need to mark things for any type of teamwork environment. Like you get to a situation and you decide that you need to set up some barriers or some zones. I can't even really begin to come up with all the scenarios right now, but that what would have this multi colored marking system that would be based on something known. So black could become danger, right? Because black means dead.
Or red because red's easier to see, and that's danger in industry.
Yeah. So that's really cool. I'll have to think more about that one. Are there any resources you know of that would be beneficial to the audience in learning more about this? I mean, I think you mentioned a couple of them. You keep mentioning these things you've sent me. I don't know if you sent them to Dorothy when she booked you or what, but I haven't seen any of them, so I'm a little dark on those. You could resend them to me, I guess.
Yeah, if I have not sent them to you, I'm sorry. I thought I did, and I thought I attached all this stuff to, or at least the link to it.
Yeah.
In the when I signed up to be a guest. But just in case that you don't want to go searching for all that again, I made 2 links. You already said that I'm a blogger and a podcaster, and I actually have those on 2 separate sites. So I assume that your listeners would prefer to go to my podcast page, but that one is kind of like yours. It's theprepperpodcast.com, and if you put a /start in there, or if you go to cleversurvivalist.com/start, that will take you to the specific blog post that I made over this triage probably about a week before I signed up to do it on your show, Jack. So it's cleversurvivalist.com/start, theprepperpodcast.com/start. And please, guys, don't crash my server. I'm on shared hosting.
I think you'll be okay. Though it does happen on occasion. It always makes me happy and sad at the same time when we break somebody's server with kindness.
Yep.
But you should be fine with that. When I think about all of this, kind of put together, it made me realize we probably don't talk enough about first response and dealing with traumatic injury on the show. Your site, I'm kind of want to ask you this: what made you come to us with that topic in mind? Your site covers a myriad of things. It's not, a medical first response site. It's a site. It discusses all types of things, probably as much variety as we do here. What was it that made you think like the thing to bring out? Do you realize that we have that hole, or is it just something you think is really important?
Well, Jack, I actually did realize that you had that hole in your programming, because, like I said, I really love your show, and I've listened to pretty much every one of them back when you were screaming at people running down the highway, and cutting you off and stuff. And I actually decided that I was going to do the same way, but then I was like, well, we've got one Jack Spirico. Let me do something my own way. So now I lock myself up in this tiny space where my family can't yell at me and tell me to do stuff while I'm podcasting. But I did notice that you had that hole, and about the time that I was making the blog post, I was like, wow, I don't think I've heard a lot about first aid and emergency response on Jack's podcast. I bet you that it would be something he would be into. And like you said, I talk about everything. Where you talk about permaculture, I throw in my 2 cents about wilderness. I dabble in permaculture, but I'm not a permaculture specialist. And before anybody asks me, I want to go ahead and throw in my 2 cents that I am not a survival expert. I am a student of survival, and I don't know what I know on accident. It's a lot of hard work, and it's a lot of time and effort. And Jack, I really enjoy your show. I don't know how many times I've said that already, but it needs to be said. These people don't know what they're missing if they're not listening to it.
Well, I appreciate that, man. I appreciate the work you've done, and I appreciate you being here with us today, Ken. And I popped you over an email just to make sure I don't mess anything up when I pass the links on. And if you hit reply to that, I'll make sure I put the links in exactly the way that you want them done. And we'll make sure people can get to your site and your podcast. And I appreciate you being on the air with us today.
All right, Jack. I had a lot of fun. I enjoyed it, and I hope you have me back on, and we can talk about some stuff that's more interesting to you, like permaculture, or we can talk about, let's not talk about how much we despise the way the government's doing things. I don't want to bring the podcast down.
All right, man. All right, folks, and with that, it's been Jack Spirico with Ken Jensen, helping you figure out how to live that better life if times get tough, or even if they don't.
And with that, I would like to say thank you, Jack, for that interview. I had a lot of fun being interviewed, and I would really appreciate it if you decided that you wanted to be interviewed on my podcast. Well, everybody, I've already gone way too long on today's podcast. I'm so sorry about that. I really enjoyed the gun show. I want you guys to start coming and seeing me on these things. And if you are an email subscriber to my podcast, only email subscribers, I have told everybody at the gun show this weekend, and I am now telling everybody in my podcast community, that if you are an email subscriber to either my podcast, theprepperpodcast.com, or my blog, cleversurvivalist.com, next week I am doing a drawing for a knife. It is the Colt Tactical Fighter Survival Knife. Go ahead and Google that sucker, and you'll see what I'm giving away. All of that knife is coming straight out of my pocket, okay? That's my cash throwing down. I'm not bringing in a corporate sponsor for that. I'm just trying to hook you guys up. So go ahead and jump over there and subscribe to my email list, all right? Well, this is Ken signing out, guys.